Good morning, barely. So my name is Alisha Wenzel, and I'm here today to talk to you about some of the water quality monitoring efforts on the campfire. My co-author or co-lead is Michael Parker. He couldn't be here today, and he also works for the Central Valley Water Board in our Reading office, and was really a lead for a lot of the coordination efforts. So I'm sure that all of you have heard about the campfire and seen pictures in the news. So this is a satellite image of the burn scar of the campfire. And real quickly, some of the scary statistics. So this fire started last November on the 8th. Very quickly became the deadliest and most destructive fire in California history, eventually burning over 150,000 acres and destroying nearly 19,000 structures. Many of those were in the town of Paradise, which, if I go back quickly, that's kind of in the center of this photo. The fire was 100% contained on November 25th, following the first rain event of the year, which is a kind of an important consideration because usually when you're designing post-fire monitoring, you want to capture that first runoff event, and that had already occurred before we even had a chance to get out there on the ground. I'll just keep using that button. So there was, quick recognition that there was a lot of water quality concerns, and we wanted to get out there and do something very quickly. So Central Valley Water Board, the agency I work with, and Butte County Public Works first hosted a meeting on November 28th, so 3 days after the end of the fire, to discuss what they would want to do. And they quickly kind of brought together a group of local, federal, state agencies, and also some local researchers and consulting firms involved in the implementation to discuss what they want to do. Kind of just thinking about where the monitoring sites would be. A big concern was public safety and some of the questions coming in from public drinking water, and the water flowing through their backyards, and also the fisheries. So the only way this was able to happen was the water boards and Department of Water Resources kind of pooled their resources, both to collect the samples and to fund the lab analysis. And we also got support from the California Department of Transportation, an unusual partner, as well as North Star Engineering, one of the local consulting firms, to help collect samples. In addition, I won't be talking about it today, but the Department of Water Resources Operations and Maintenance Program also conducted monitoring in Lake Oroville and upstream on some of those rivers. And they worked really to kind of coordinate with us as far as when they were sampling and what analytes they were doing. The main objective for the monitoring, so like I mentioned, the main driver immediately was the concerns about public safety and their drinking water. So that was kind of what was able to get a lot of managers and people focused on getting this happening. But we also wanted to make sure that whatever we did would support understanding of the fire effects and kind of future research efforts. The watersheds in this area do support drinking water, of course. Also, a lot of the areas from Paradise and Butte Creek drain out down to Central Valley, where there's a lot of agriculture and cows and other things using the water. The creeks also, like I said, they flow through people's backyards, they're swimming holes, so we started to get questions about whether it's safe to be in contact with the water, whether it's safe to swim in the water. There's also really important cold water habitat, including the spring run, Chinook salmon, and Butte Creek. I should also point out on the upper right here, the slide. So as far as EMP implementation on this fire, so there wasn't a lot of time. So it was amazing what they were able to get out there and do. They pretty much had to work with the resources available, which was wattles. So North Star Engineering, Department of Water Resources, and some CEC crews did an amazing job of getting miles and miles of these wattles out on the fire area, just kind of working with what they had available. So where did we monitor? So again, you can see here the burn, the fire perimeter in red on this map. And the 10 water quality monitoring sites we ended up selecting. So there were some limitations here as far as where we could get. So when we started monitoring, a lot of the roads were still closed or had limited access. We also had to think about just the logistics. So we had 3 separate sampling crews kind of converging on this area from different locations, and we had to get there to collect the samples and then get the samples back to the lab in a reasonable amount of time. So that's how we kind of ended up with these 10 stations. In dark blue, kind of on the upper part of the map, those are the sites that were selected by Department of Water Resources in the Butte Creek, the main part of the Butte Creek watershed. So they had kind of an upper control site, a site on Little Butte Creek, just above the confluence, and then a downstream site on Butte Creek itself. Our waterborne staff, we sampled 4 locations. 3 of them are in yellow, were in the town of Paradise itself. So we have Hamlin Creek, Clear Creek, and Dry Creek. For the first part of the monitoring, we also had a site on the west branch arm of Lake Warville, just above a water intake. We discontinued that site in the spring as the water levels started to come up, and it was a little bit less of a concern. And then on the bottom part are 3 sites sampled by our Caltrans and Northstar Engineering teams. They're kind of just downstream of the fire area on the valley floor. So these are the water quality parameters we selected. Mainly these were just copied over from the Carr fire, which is another Northern California fire last summer. And that had, their team had worked on these, so we could just kind of grab them to quickly get out there and start monitoring. So kind of your conventional things, we sampled nutrients, total and dissolved metals, some general chemistry parameters, solids, of course, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. So these are something that are formed during combustion and are concern after fires. Because of the contact recreation concerns, we added a fecal indicator bacteria, E. coli, and then our standard field measurements, including turbidity. And then our sampling design is we went out and tried to grab these samples. We tried to target the runoff events, which is, anyone who's done water quality monitoring knows is difficult because storms always occur in the middle of the night and on the weekends. So we had some limitations, but overall I think we did pretty well. So on you're looking at the far left, you can kind of see where the campfire occurs on this graph, and there's a couple first storm events that helped put the fire out. And then the dashed red lines show our sampling events. We ended up sampling 6 times. Our last sampling event in May was initially intended to be a dry weather event, and we got rain, of course, so we got one last storm event. So on the top, I should have said you have the flow of both Butte Creek and the West Branch Feather River, which are really pretty much in agreement. And then the bottom graph is the precipitation in the town of Paradise. So you can see, these systems, you can see pretty quick response in terms of the flow. Just another quick kind of look at how the flow was, the different storm events we sampled and how that flow affected turbidity. So we have our 6 storm events. The top row shows the peak flow from those. The really big one was that February 26th event, where got up to close to 6,600 CFS. And then the second row is the 48-hour rainfall in inches. So we got a range of different sizes of storm events. And then the bottom row is the average turbidity at our sites. And what really stands out is the average turbidity of close to 200 from that February event. So the pictures at the bottom are the lowest and highest turbidity sites from that. So on the left is at the control site on Butte Creek, which had about 70. And then Little Butte Creek, which was up at 970. And the middle photograph is kind of pictures of, as they were measuring settable solids. You can really see the distinction there. This is really interesting as I kind of move forward and talk about some of our actual results from those events. So we kind of expected high flow, high turbidity to mean lots of pollutants, and that's actually not what we ended up seeing. So drinking water, that was the question we kept getting asked. So we rushed these results to get the answers out to the public. And how we ended up, we primarily looked at them. So California has adopted maximum contaminant levels for drinking water. There are two types. One, the primary MCLs are those that are to protect public health, and then secondary MCLs protect taste and odor in our drinking water. So by and large, we did see some things above the primary MCLs there on the left. So 8% of our samples exceeded the MCLs. Most of those were metals, aluminum, antimony, lead, arsenic. And then more frequently we saw, so 20% of our samples exceeded the secondary MCLs. Again, aluminum is the top one, which is sort of interesting. So we don't have a lot of pre-fire data in this area, but we know from other monitoring that we do tend to see aluminum and some of these other metals during storm events, just kind of naturally occurring. So it's hard to say how much is caused by the fire and how much is just natural. Some of the other ones, though, like antimony, are things that we hadn't seen before. The other interesting result that I wanted to share with you guys, so I mentioned that we sampled the PAHs, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are produced during combustion. Typically, the PAHs aren't very soluble, so they would more tend to bind to sediments or organic material and fall out of your water column. But it was kind of one of the things that was recommended, so we did sample it. And interestingly enough, we did detect them kind of all over the place. Not super high levels, but they were present. So what you see here is the sum of all the PAHs in the samples, and then they're organized by sampling event. The different colors indicate what site they were collected at. So orange was our Lake Oroville site. The green colors were from the valley floor. Yellow was within the town of Paradise, and then blue was in Butte Creek itself. So we didn't see any in our first sampling event in December. We did start to pick them up, some of those smaller storm events in January. The really big storm event in February, only one site had one PAH, not necessarily what we'd expect. But then we started to see them at lower levels again in the later storm events. So this is something that we definitely want to follow up on. Some initial conclusions. So collaboration was essential to make this happen, especially on the short time scale. Some of our data assessment is definitely limited by the lack of pre-fire data, with the exception of some data from Butte Creek. I think it's really important to get out there and monitor multiple storm events, since we saw kind of that variation depending on the size of the storm and timing. Like I said, the PAHs detected at all sites in all but 2 sampling events. And then we definitely want to do additional work to look more at the impacts to aquatic life, since this was kind of really driven by the public health concerns. So one way that was already luckily able to happen, and so Dan Pickard and the great folks at the Chico State Research Foundation Aquatic Bioassessment Lab were able to mobilize and get some samples this spring, and I was able to scrape together some money to help fund that. So they went out and sampled 8 stations within the campfire area. We're still waiting for those results. And I think just by chance, there's also, I've heard that there's some other sites that were sampled by other ongoing projects within the campfire area. So that'll be a great data set that hopefully we can expand upon. Some of our next steps. So we are continuing to meet maybe about quarterly with our Campfire Emergency Water Quality Monitoring Group. That group has been really great at sharing data and thinking about what we want to do next. We do want to seek funding to continue the monitoring and continue some of those partnerships. So just, I checked last week, the cleanup of all of the structures that were burned is just now coming to completion. So most of those spent the entire last winter on the landscape, and those sites are continued in their disturbed state for this next winter. So there definitely is potential for ongoing effects. We want to kind of document that recovery period. Like I said, also look closer at aquatic life. We do have some funding to continue monitoring this winter, but then we'll have to kind of look forward. The other part that was kind of really interesting to me was thinking about impacts to groundwater. So Department of Water Resources leading some efforts. They did some initial sampling at some homeowners' wells this spring/summer. They're trying to continue that effort. Big parts of this watershed, especially along Butte Creek, the only source of drinking water is from wells. These are pretty old, shallow wells, so there's a lot of potential for impacts. And then, of course, through opportunities like this and other communication, we want to kind of document our lessons learned and think ahead for the next fires. So again, I wanted to just acknowledge our partners, so in particular Department of Water Resources. Butte County has been great hosting our meetings and sharing information. Caltrans and Northstar that helped our samples, and the Product Bioassessment Lab. And with that, I'll take questions. Also, my contact information, as well as Michael's, is up here. And on the bottom of that website is our water board website that will take you to information about the Camp Fire, the Carp Fire, and the Mendocino Complex fires as far as the water board activities. Thank you.
Did you see anything, any signal in the fecal coliform data? Did you see anything in the responses?
It's hard to say. With any type of storm event, you'd expect some elevated bacteria. So we did see some elevated, but nothing too concerning, considering storm events and what you'd expect to be washing in.
So Alisha, you mentioned that because of the timing of the storm and the new rainfall event that first happened, there was very little time. They used whatever they had available for the BMPs. So I'm kind of curious, since there's been no restoration or anything like that, it's going to go in the impaired state into the next rainy season. Has there been any discussion about trying to get BMPs in place before winter this year?
So there is work. I'm not completely up to date, but I know there has been a lot of discussion, particularly, I guess, normally after the crews go in and they clean up this, like the burnt house, and then they do soils testing, and then they pull out and they pull all the BMPs with that. So they are trying to change that and actually get BMPs out there so that the sites will be protected this winter. So a lot of if you look at some of these pictures, the homes were right on the creek.